Okay, and on to Module 56. So, again, if you're in Google Classroom, you would open up the slides. Again, they're a great thing to have there. So, I'm in the Unit 11 slides. I'm going to go back to this slide. It's one of the earlier ones. It's right, so there again, it's the beginning. Going to this one. So, in Module 55, it was all about the psychoanalytic. Now we're moving into the psychodynamic, and it's a little bit different. So, it's based, obviously, you can see it has the same like base words, psycho, but it's a little bit different. And they still focus on the unconscious and think that the unconscious plays a really big part. But with the psychodynamic perspective, they didn't fully agree with Freud. So, some of the ways that the psychodynamic perspective differs from Freud's ideas is that it also emphasizes more contemporary scientific beliefs. And they think that rather than everything being sexual, and that everything was based on sex and aggression, they believed that there was a huge emphasis on childhood experiences and how those influence our conscious thoughts. So I'm going to scroll forward a little bit in the slides. Good. So we sometimes call these people neo-Freudian psychoanalysts. I said this in the first video I posted, but neo just means like a new form of that. So neo-Freudians are people that were basically influenced by Freud and believe some of his things, but they take a different approach because they're in a different time. So they, again, kind of agreed with some of Freud's ideas, but they placed more emphasis on the conscious mind's role in interpreting or coping with certain experiences, meaning not everything is unconscious. We're not just driven by these like deep down desires. We also have a say in the things that we're thinking because we're humans. We have a brain, right? It's what we've been learning about this whole year. Again, as I said earlier, they also doubted that sex and aggression were all consuming motivations. So if you are actually in your packet, that answers some of the Module 56 guided notes. So it says, on what beliefs do neo-Freudians differ from Freud? So that would be there. So next, looking at Adler and Horney. I know it looks like horny, but it's not. So these were two psychologists that were pretty important in this perspective, the psychodynamic. So Alfred Adler and Karen Horney believed that behavior is driven by efforts to conquer childhood anxieties. I mean, a lot of the things we went through in the past, whether it was like our parents divorcing or moving or a huge accident or whatever it might be, we're constantly trying to figure out how to change that. So just to touch on those two a little bit, and it talks about them on page, where? Page 566 in the textbook is where it gets into their beliefs. But as I showed you last video, I also made some notes on my own and just wrote down really quickly. So Adler's whole belief was that we have an inferiority complex. If you've heard of that, it's basically saying we're trying to conquer those feelings of inadequacy. Oh, I can't talk. Meaning those feelings that we're not good enough. Horney, on the other hand, said that our childhood anxieties then trigger this desire for wanting love and security. So she would be somebody who kind of looked at this and maybe would say, like, well, you had a parent step out when you were younger. Maybe it was your dad, so you didn't have a dad in your life. Therefore, you try to find love with older men or whatever it might be. You probably heard that, like daddy problems, right? That would maybe be a psychodynamic kind of perspective of it. That's obviously a simplified one, but is something that they might believe. So another important person in this perspective is Carl Jung. Some say it Jung, some say it Jung, but it's the J is silent. He believed that we have this thing called a collective unconscious, meaning that we have this shared inherited reservoir of memories from our species history. Basically saying like, that's why certain cultures believe in this belief or why certain cultures do this or that. So a lot of people were like, that's kind of not true. And don't necessarily agree with it, but it is one of those perspectives that does come up every now and then. So again, if you go back to the week 2 packet, it talks about this. It also talks about something called archetypes. archetypes here, and that's kind of talking about these are like an archetype is like those common images. So like we have this, like I think in a like Judeo-Christian society, right? Like in a society that believes in Christ, they would see like their archetype for Christ looks like is like this white guy with like long hair, like kind of skinny, you've seen the picture, right? That would be an example of an archetype. Okay. So next it moves on to talking about how this is assessed. Like how do psychodynamics psychologists, how do they figure out what your personality is like? And they use things called projective tests, the thematic apperception test, and the Rorschach inkblot test. So I'm going to go back to the slides. So these projective tests basically are a personality test that provide ambiguous, meaning like there's no purpose to it really, other than like they're not going to tell you what it is. Ambiguous stimuli designed to trigger your projection of one's inner feelings. So two of these tests are the TAT, the thematic apperception test. And basically what the TAT is, you're given just a picture. It could be like a photograph, a drawing, whatever. And they say, hey, look at this. Tell me what you see. Like, what's the story? And then they use that to say, okay, based on the story you created, this is maybe like what you're feeling or whatever it is. And this is your personality. The next one is the Rorschach test. And you may have seen these. It's also called the inkblot. So in the slides, you'll see originally in class, we would have done these together. But I show you a series of images. And what the psychologist would do from this perspective is show the patient the different images and look through them. And they'd say, what do you see? Describe what you see. So you can go through those, look at them. Additionally, and I actually did this yesterday, if you go back to the packet, you'll have to go to the version that's posted in Google Classroom, which I did here in the classwork section. Go to the Unit 11 packet. There it is. There's a link in here. It's going to take you to a quiz, and you can take these quizzes on your own. So you look at the image, say what you see. I'm like, okay. When I first saw this, I saw like, I don't know, I felt like I saw like an angel with wings. I don't know. So then it'll say, all right, what did you see? And I was like, well, I guess that's the closest. I really didn't see anything else. So I would just go on. And you'll do the next one. There's like 10 of them. At the end, it'll tell you if you're psychologically disturbed. So again, these tests are all kind of subjective and don't necessarily tell you exactly what your personality would be, but they might get into some deeper kind of understanding, which again is part of the psychodynamic perspective. All right, so that's module 56. Again, let me know if you have any questions about this module or any of the things in it. Okay?